Alright everyone, the UK is imploding right now. As of last night, it looked like Theresa May might be resigning, but now she's not, but she's facing calls to resign, mainly from within her own party. A bunch of people basically walking out on her. They don't give a shit. She's had, other people resign from her cabinet, and she's got people within her cabinet. These are executive positions there, calling on her to leave. Because what happened is she tried to force, I guess, last minute, a new Brexit deal, and it it dropped like a dud, and nobody wants it. But that's the thing, that's all by design. See, the whole goal here is to cause enough chaos that people don't want a Brexit, kick the can down the road. If that ends up not happening, you have a hard Brexit, they'll just try to collapse your economy. That's how they're going to try to convince the people of the UK to rejoin the EU eventually. The problem is that the people that lead your country fundamentally have wealth in the EU mainly. They consider themselves Europeans, not British. And these are the people you're having negotiate. Like Theresa May was a Remainer. That's the whole problem. You should have had Nigel Farage be your negotiator. I don't know why Theresa May took it upon herself to... Well, I know why she took it upon herself, but why people allowed her to do so. So now you've got additional chaos, and this is while you've also got fucking milkshake bullshit going on. Literally, weaponized politics on the ground over in the UK, which again would be terrifying to people, and they'd call it a form of creeping fascism if it were Nigel Farage's people throwing a milkshake at conservative or Labour members or something like that. If they were doing that, then everyone would have a huge problem with it. It'd be the Nazis are coming, they're getting violent. All of a sudden, though, it's throw milkshakes at fascists or some stupid hashtag they're using. And their idea of fascism now, if you're left-wing in Europe, I guess, is Nigel Farage or Count Dankula or something like that. It's a very, very strange group of fascists. Mostly they're, it's a bunch of YouTubers and free speech advocates, and then, a dude who, drinks and smokes a little bit too much, almost died in a plane crash, I think, a while ago, which is funny, and fucking spends his time saying, yeah, we should have sovereignty. So sovereignty is now a form of fascism, according to the left-wing politicians of the UK. You got the Brexit Party, now far ahead for the European elections. I think, aren't they having that in less than a week, I think, is the vote for that. I could be wrong. Then you have your next general elections. The Brexit Party is arguably in second place now in some of those polls. It's certainly been pulling ahead. So basically, Nigel Farage revenge, he's even more powerful now. He's come back in a new form. He's got even more support. UKIP, I don't think, ever became that popular. I mean, it got, plenty of votes, but never really had much representation. It's looking like the Brexit Party might be able to actually accomplish that simply because of the incompetence of people within, I guess, the conservative movement over in the UK. It looks like they're being displaced by by the Brexit Party. So basically, it's an upswelling of conservatives that realize that your conservative movement isn't conservative. I eagerly await the day that happens to the Republican Party here, and people realize that with the exception of Trump's populists, Rand Paul, and a handful of others, most of the Republicans here aren't conservative either. They're not. I mean, they're saying no new taxes, but they're not saying reduce them back to an older level. No new gun control, but no, we're not going to strip back the existing stuff. Trump's the only one who's suggested that, and then out of nowhere you get the fucking bump stock ban too. It's ridiculous. So Theresa May's clinging to power like a leech. And the whole goal of that is by design. See, what's happening is that the globalists wanted her to negotiate from a position of weakness to make the deal unpalatable, to try to bring down the whole system. That's the whole goal. Nigel Farage's error was thinking that the globalists would just give up and say, well, okay, there's been a Brexit, we lose. That's not how they work, because there are trillions of dollars collectively that they're looking at potentially losing if there's sovereignty for the UK. So they're trying to basically make a monstrosity of the deal that'll eventually get rejected by the British people at large, or have a hard Brexit and then bring the economy down. So this is literally, all this chaos that's going on is literally part of a globalist plan, so to speak. It's a bunch of billionaires, banksters, and people like that have more money in the EU than they do in the UK. So they're looking at it as, hey, if the UK becomes sovereign, my God, I'm going to lose all this money. I don't know whether I'm to foot or horseback, the old Vermont saying is. If there's no Brexit, then no problem. It doesn't matter if you end up in a situation where you have a Brexit and then have to rejoin, which is what they would, I think, rather have, or you have a really, really hard Brexit, something like that. Or just a deal that's so bad that it gets rejected, and again, you have a second referendum among the people of the UK. That's the other possibility. The problem is, I think they realized that was a bad idea because the polling was never there. The vast majority of British, I think that Brexit would probably win by a larger margin if they held another vote on it. I really think so, because I think it would incense a lot of people that were sort of on the fence anyway, and they're like, well, I'll vote to remain maybe, but, you know, I don't really care that much. They'd be pissed. So you'd probably have like a 60-40 split at that point. Hold a second referendum, see what happens. Meanwhile, it looks like it might be Prime Minister Nigel Farage or something considered crazy and impossible in the past. The thing is, if he were to govern, I think he'd do a pretty good job. I think that Nigel Farage would probably be remembered as, well, he'd probably be remembered like the Trump of the UK. That is, he'd be doing a good job, but he would be perpetually held back by the fact that half the population would think he was Hitler. Even if he never did anything Hitler-esque, he could say, okay, well, people should defend themselves and we're going to get rid of censorship and stuff. And somehow this is now a totalitarian platform, supposedly. It's interesting, the fascists, the Nazis of our era are free speech advocates and don't want to burn books. It's very, very strange. It seems that they're a very reformed Nazi movement at this point. And they're also very multicultural. A lot of them are like black and Hispanic and Jewish. It's a really, really strange situation where the lamestream neoliberal left has overstretched the term Nazi, fascism so badly that it now encompasses basically everyone, so it no longer has a meaning. If you actually think that Count Dankula, who's basically socialistic on many issues, is actually a Nazi for teaching a dog a stupid trick, then I've got some swampland to sell you in Florida. If you think that Sargon is a Nazi because he said, well, I don't like feminism or something like that, oh my God, what a terrible person. You mean he doesn't want to be constantly spoken down to by people who are sexist? What a Nazi. Terrible person. Tommy Robinson, who gets assaulted constantly and gets milkshakes thrown at him and weird shit like that. Yes, he's a fascist too. Despite the fact that he's never said anything like that, and his primary political beef at this point is the fact that he's being dispossessed of his ability to speak about other political issues. And the UK's government thinks it can Orwell these people out of existence. You know, they've got another thing coming. It's never going to work. Sargon and Dankula and Robinson, all these people, way more popular now than they were before. Can't stop them from going around from venue to venue and speaking. All they can do is try to whip people up into a frenzy about the brown shirts storming in and then go throw milkshakes around, I guess. Doesn't make them look too good. Then you've got a prime minister who can't govern, with a revolt from her own party on her hands, number two. You've got the Brexit party shaking things up in your political system. You have the rise and fall sort of the techno UKIP, you could call it. Although they have a pulse politically. Things are weird over there, to tell the truth. I'm very glad that I'm on this side of the Atlantic, to tell the truth. Although it is an interesting spectacle. It's very funny because like 200 years ago, people like over in the British Empire, they'd look at the American political system and they would chuckle about it and say, oh, it's interesting. It's like these people are weird and shoot each other for political reasons. And they considered themselves astute. And so Britain was like, the king of the world. And we were just sort of a kind of power at the time, and it was considered interesting. We were the rustics over on the other side. We were the interesting people who were experimenting with weird political systems. Now we're looking back over the pond at Europe, and we're seeing the same thing from over here now. It's very, very funny. Now we're the lord of the world, and watching all the European countries shift politically at a rapid pace. It's really interesting. Dystopian, unpalatable at times, but very interesting nonetheless. That's about all. Peace out.